Hello, so I'm going to be reading from my PowerPoint that I displayed just for my own personal knowledge of keeping track of everything and all the questions that I want to hit. So based off of my field experience, I will say that I observed a pre-K class. The teacher's name is Miss J. So I will go on with the planning and preparation. So the instructional outcomes for this lesson, students were able to identify letters of the alphabet. They could recall sequences of events. I remember them reading a book, The Three Little Pigs, and they were prompted questions about it. They were able to match animal pictures to the words with help. Students were able to draw a picture of their favorite animal and then utilize their gross motor skills to act out an animal. During recess time, they went outside and pretended to be whatever animal they were interested in. And then on my PowerPoint, which I'll post with this video, you can see the standards for that as well. So some of the assessments that I observed in the class were formal, small group, large group, and then individual assessments where Ms. J sat down individually with the student and just kind of observed their abilities, like on the animal word matching. So there were animals that were talked about and displayed via visual aid, like a flashcard, and then with help, students were guided to point out the word that was associated with the animal, like picture of a horse and then horse, because she's still trying to teach them letter recognition and learning to read. It's not really expected that a preschooler can learn to read. So the next question was about the cohesiveness of the lesson. So I would rate overall the cohesiveness to be an A plus, or an A more specifically, because I think that she met the needs of each student with accommodations, because there was a student with a disability in the classroom that had autism spectrum disorder, and there was a student in the classroom with cerebral palsy. Another student was an English language learner. So she did have specific accommodations and no actual aid that would come into the classroom. So for that sake, and for the sake of implementing their standards into the lesson, I will give her an A. But for closures and transitions, that's the only thing that's like missing the plus part of the A. So I would rate it an A. Although it seemed simple, they were specifically designed and tailored to meet the needs of each student's cognitive and developmental ability. She was careful when creating her lesson plans that align with the theme of the week, which were animals, and the objectives. So I put that Ms. J utilizes the cultures and backgrounds of each student. When designing her lesson plan, she takes into account their abilities, goals, traditions, family, and socioeconomical backgrounds. Some of the students were unfamiliar with learning how to use an iPad or a tablet because they did not have exposure to screen time at home. A lot of them come from a lower socioeconomic background, so that was like a learning process on its own, getting them familiar with technology in the class. She wanted to make sure that the lesson plans were simplified for students who had disabilities or for students who were ELLs. So making sure that she had written and oral communication and giving instruction and giving specific attention in areas of struggle. One child in her classroom had a cognitive disability and often tries to leave the classroom. I did witness a time where this student got up during a lesson because he was frustrated and did try to leave the classroom. So she had to de-escalate that situation, which allowed her to utilize her time management for that activity. So I put overall no improvements at this time, but I'll get to the closure part at the end. So I really liked how she asked prompting questions. And then for one lesson, she began asking the students what their favorite animals were. She asked what noise they made. And then she engaged in group discussions about animals, followed by reading a book and allowing them to ask questions. This was also a way for her to gauge like their sequence of events and their background knowledge in that specific area of like animals. Since there was an ELL in the classroom, she made sure to ask the names of the animals, but she also added their Spanish names as well while using a visual aid. So she did have these flashcards that had pictures of animals, and then it had an English and a Spanish version of the name. And then for the child with a sensory disorder, she offered a tactile aid, which was just plastic animals, so that allowed them to kind of hold it, feel it, see that this is a horse, and then she kind of sat down with them from there. I will say she was constantly involving her students in the learning process. She asked about their interest and engaged each child with a beautifully constructed introduction. It was almost like reading a cliffhanger. I quoted what she said in here. She began her lesson. Sorry, I'm reading this. She began her lesson by asking the students. It was almost like a riddle. She said, "Can anyone tell me what we're learning about this week?" Some of them have fur, some have scales, and some of them we have at home. And then after using those prompts, eventually students were like, "Oh, it's an animal," or "It's a dog," or gave some kind of animal. A lot of them did say a dog because they had a dog at home and it had fur. She does have students with disabilities and offered positive feedback and challenges. So she told one of the students in the classroom, "Since you can count to 50, let's working on counting to 60 next." And she would always encourage the students to work towards the next step, giving clues as needed. All of the students in the classroom were able to identify letters, count, and know how to spell their name. Her goal is for some of the students to learn to read before kindergarten. Because she did have a varying age group of children. It was 4, 5, and 6-year-olds in there, so meeting those different needs was a challenge for her as well. She encourages them to do things independently, like hand washing, cleaning up after art projects, unpacking their bags, put away their lunches. Some of them even microwave their own lunches. The teacher clearly communicates objectives before each lesson, orally and written. She had one of those like big notepads that she displayed in the classroom and wrote down the objectives, and then as she went over them, she pointed out like, this is the objective we're going to be learning. As I mentioned previously, one improvement that I would suggest is a better closing of each lesson. So the morning was broken down into several different activities: morning circle, alphabet, weather, days of the week, months of the year, introduction to the lesson, identifying the animals, introduction of the theme, the names of the animals, letter recognition, and critical thinking questions, followed by group discussion and a book about the 3 little pigs. And I think that there was not enough transition time in between each lesson. Everything was just kind of like blended together. It seemed like we were jumping from one thing to another. Which I know could be like overstimulating for some of them, especially ones who have been experienced to trauma. I believe that the instructional goals were met according to the standards and the individual needs of each of the students. Considering she was with 10 children by herself and some of them had certain accommodations that they needed, I think that she did a really good job handling those obstacles, and then with her time management, planning, preparation. Displayed throughout the classroom were several inclusive student activities, but also specifically the brag board. That was one of the things I noticed when I came into the classroom. So she displayed all of their artwork, all of their academic successes, so that way they were proud of their work. And when I came into the classroom, I really felt like it was very homey. I felt accepted. There were bright colors, lots of windows were open, bright light. Classroom plants, each student had their own little plant that they took care of. She had her own plant as the teacher. and each family is communicated with to the highest level via daily reports, monthly newsletters, parent-teacher nights, ASQ evaluations. She's constantly making sure that the parents have all the information on their child's progress that they need, and invites them to be guest speakers in the classroom. I took a look at one of the newsletters that she had posted outside of the classroom, and one of the events was like it's for like an event in the future, sometime in July. There was a carnival week was the theme, and she invited the parents to come out to be volunteers for like 2.5 hours, helping with face paint and creating arts and crafts, doing games. So I really like that she involved those parents. She sends home forms in the native language of the parents so that they can stay up to date on everything in the class, and has the parent resource posted outside of the classroom, which displayed information. This was another thing I really liked about the CCIS program, ELRC program, food pantries, free children's clothing, and then online educational resources for parents and students. And it also contained her personal contact information as well. So if anyone had any questions, they could feel free to reach out. She demonstrated privacy for each of her students by not disclosing their disabilities to other parents, not mentioning their names when incident reports are sent home. And when a student is identified with a struggle, the parents are discreetly made aware of it via a letter, and then asked to attend a parent-teacher conference to go over the observations and assessments that were completed over time. So this conducts my field experience video, and I will link this PowerPoint if anyone wants to take a look at it. It's a little lengthy, but it does go over some really good points. Thank you.